It's Wednesday, it's 11:15 and we're live in Westminster.
I'm under no illusions about the scale that this new government faces in fixing the economy.
The economy flatlined for the second month in a row. Is Labour right to pin its hopes on growth?
Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War.
Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat.
In a race that's neck and neck, will last night's presidential debate prove decisive? And after yesterday's vote cleared the way for cuts to winter fuel payments, Keir Starmer faces Rishi Sunak at Prime Minister's Questions. We'll bring you that live at noon. Joining us today, West Yorkshire Mayor Tracy Brabin, Conservative MP and Shadow Transport Secretary Helen Whately, Liberal Democrat MP Joshua Reynolds and The Sun's political correspondent Noah Hoffman. This is Politics Live. Let's start with the economy and show you this headline. BBC News, UK economy fails to grow for second month in a row. Yes, well, it failed to grow again in July. The Office for National Statistics, their figures state it flatlined for a second month in a row. My opening question in just a moment after we hear, first of all, from the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves.
I'm under no illusions about the huge challenge that this new government faces in turning around the economy after 14 years of stagnation and very poor economic growth. We're not going to be able to turn that round in 2 months or indeed in one budget. But we are starting to make the long-term decisions to get a grip of our public finances and to work in partnership with business to unlock the huge potential that there is in this economy and make Britain, make working people better off.
Tracy, is Labour pinning just too much hope, betting the house, in fact, on the economy growing?
No, they have to. And you saw with that data that July, when Rishi Sunak was Prime Minister, the economy is flatlining, and that focus on growth has got to be the way we turn around the fortunes of this country. And what's been really great is to see from Rachel and from Keir that they also understand that mayors have a role to play in growth. So the investment that we're making in transport, in skills and business support, that's why we were brought down to number 10. I think it was hours after the election to talk about our commitment to supporting the growth agenda, but also the ask of government that we have our 10-year growth plans, and by working together with government that we can then power up our regions, and by doing so we help grow the whole economy.
Helen, what do you think? There was some growth earlier in the year, some sort of bouncing back for the economy. It shows, though, that it is fragile, let's put it that way at the moment. Is it your fault?
I mean, looking at the facts, the first 6 months of this year, the UK had the strongest growth in the G7. We know that when Labour took power, they took on that legacy plus low unemployment and inflation right back down to normal. So clearly there are pressures on the public finances. I'm sure we'll talk about that later. But actually that is a strong economic foundation. It is really, really important that the Chancellor and the Prime Minister at the budget focus on growth. Now, I'm worried that what we're seeing from their policies so far, they've been talking about growth, but actually their policies aren't pro-growth.
Which ones?
They're often anti-business. We look at some of the things that are coming in on workers' rights. Clearly workers' rights are important, but actually I'm concerned about some of the things they're putting which will be hard for businesses and the cost of regulation. Then also, the Chancellor said herself about the importance of grip on public finances, but we're not seeing that. We're seeing those above-inflation pay rises, for instance, for train drivers, for junior doctors, other unions that haven't seen those high pay rises saying, well, what about us already? So that grip on public finances is really important.
I mean, the tradition is that parties, governments do follow the recommendations of pay review bodies. I haven't heard anyone say that you wouldn't do that. I have heard Conservatives saying that you would have pinned it more to reform. But more generally, is Labour pinning too much on growth happening?
I think it just shows the economic vandalism that the Tories have left the country with, to be honest. You've got stagnant growth, you've got the cost of living crisis that's impacting families harder every single day. And what I'm not seeing the Labour Party really talking about is the things to kickstart the economy on that stable, succinct growth that we really need.
Like
the NHS. And getting the NHS fixed, bringing those waiting times down, social care. That's what we really need to see to get people
How
back
would that
into
help the
work.
economy grow? By getting people back into
It would
work?
help get people back into work.
But that's
and help
a
restart
medium,
the
long-term
economy.
plan, isn't it?
But it's something we need to do, and we need to stop thinking in these short-term views, and we need to start looking at that cross-party consensus for how we get our NHS back up and running to then be able to get people back into work, to be able to kick the economy back up.
How difficult is this for Labour? Second month in a row. They've only been in power since July, but everything is predicated on growth rates returning, or certainly to the sort of rates that we had years ago of 2%. Are they betting too much?
I think they don't have a choice. They do have to bet their sort of legacy and how they're perceived by the public in what they do with the economy. I mean, 2 months is obviously such a short amount of time, and no one can sort of punish them for what's the statistics that we see today. And again, a lot of those are a legacy of the last, decade and a bit of Tory government as well. So they need time, but I think there is a limit to how long Rachel Reeves can roll out this line that this is a Tory legacy. So people will want to start seeing improvements. The budget will be a big moment, a big turning point in terms of the decisions made on taxes there. So I think they do deserve that breathing space and that time, but people will expect to see bills go down, to see their life improve, I think, within the next year.
Is there too much doom and gloom coming from Rachel Reeves and the Prime Minister?
No. I think it is reality, and they have to. I mean, the 22 billion was a shock to the system. So they do. Hang on. They have to take a pragmatic view. But I would just challenge what Helen was saying about the fact that it's the commitment to workers' rights and to make sure people are paid properly that is going to be the problem for Labour going forward. How much? Hang on.
That is completely not what I said.
How much?
Well, let her finish, and I'll let you come back.
How much has it cost our economy by this government not getting into those negotiations with the trade unions and sorting out pay? And certainly when it comes to transport, and I know that this is your brief, not being able to bring people to a room to sort out
all right, well, let Helen respond.
Pay, rail, the way that it impacted on our community and our business and our growth in West Yorkshire, because this government were tardy about getting a resolution. And we have seen this government bringing change.
Helen, there is a cost to strikes, isn't there?
Yes, of course there is. But there are reasons to have a proper negotiation. And for instance, it's really important as part of negotiations to agree for reforms, for instance, for the train drivers. Labour conceded on all modernisation of working practice, which is so important, both for productivity and to have more efficient railways. And
the unions are very up for modernisation.
For the sustainability of our... But the point is, so you talked about, Rachel Reeves has been talking a lot about this black hole, but that is a consequence of Labour's choices in governments. For instance,
let's talk about... Hang on, both of you. I'm going to interrupt.
Which are not based on independent pay review body recommendations, to be clear. They're Labour's own ministers' negotiations directly with
Let's talk about one of the other choices, and that is to cut the winter fuel payments to millions of pensioners. BBC News headline, millions of pensioners will lose winter fuel cash after Commons vote. Yes, it took place yesterday. There have been weeks of rows over this issue. Now, the government, it was never in doubt that the government would win last night, but there was some dissent. 52 Labour MPs abstaining, only one voting against. Obviously, that is a sign of Keir Starmer's majority, and many of those who abstained had legitimate reasons to do so. But no, a number of his own MPs are not happy. We heard and had Rachel Maskell on yesterday. But in terms of a dent in Keir Starmer's power, there isn't really one, is there?
No, I think a lot of the Labour MPs who are really grandstanding on the issue were sort of the usual characters, the Corbynite MPs who...
Well, many of them are independent, of course.
Yeah, people that aren't really taken very seriously anymore, and rightly so. However, there is a lot of disquiet, even among those loyal to Starmer, because it's not a nice decision that has been made, and it's really caused a lot of anger with constituents. And I think there is a sort of universal agreement that, an aristocrat doesn't need a winter fuel payment, but it's that demographic who just don't meet the pension credit threshold that are really going to struggle from this, and it's tough politically.
Right, well, you represent thousands of pensioners in West Yorkshire, and it's happening. They're going to lose their winter fuel payments this winter. It's already cold. How do you justify that cut?
Yeah, it is really difficult, and no Labour MP ever wants to make this decision. I'm sure there are many sleepless nights about getting to this point. But look, we are referring to growth, aren't we, and the state of the economy, and difficult decisions are going to have to be made. However, I am also pleased that we have focused on the triple lock. So at the end of a Labour government, pensioners will have 1,300 more. There's also the household support has been extended for another 6 months.
I understand. We've heard those arguments. But how is it going down in West Yorkshire?
It's not easy. I did a BBC phone-in yesterday, and of course people are very worried. But there are certainly pension credit is under. There's far too few people signed up for pension credit, and that's what we should be focusing on, because it's not only about winter fuel. It's also about your TV licence.
But what I'm trying to talk about, engage, is what's happening to people in your area that you represent. Because your colleague, Rachel Maskell, we spoke to her yesterday. She abstained in the end. She's spoken out about this cut, and she said, "I cannot process how governments past did not protect those vulnerable people. Labour must be different. We need mitigation because we must protect those under our care. Otherwise, what is the point of power, Rachel?"
But honestly, blame the Conservatives for all this.
All right. Your choices.
Absolutely.
These are your
difficult
choices.
decisions have to be made. There is no doubt about it. And there are more difficult decisions that will be coming down the line. Hang
on, Helen, let me just come back to something from the 2017 Conservative manifesto, which you stood on, as did many of your current fellow Conservative MPs, and it said, "We will means test winter fuel payments, focusing assistance on the least well-off pensioners who are most at risk of fuel poverty." So it's a little rich coming from Conservatives to say that this is the worst thing that's ever been done politically, is to take the winter fuel payment away from better off pensioners.
Look, we know there has been a debate, Noah referred to it a while ago, a moment ago, about whether they're all pensioners who receive a winter fuel allowance. But the point here is that it's a very low level, and what Labour is doing is meaning that there are pensioners who really need the winter fuel allowance who now won't get it.
So you're not against means testing?
To be clear, there are 18,000 pensioners in my constituency who are losing their winter fuel allowance. Some of them have written to me, including one pensioner who only heats one room of their house through the winter and sleeps on their sofa because that's in the one room that they heat through the winter. And that pensioner is losing their winter fuel allowance. This is what this government is choosing to do. And to be clear, it's a choice. So on the other hand,
it is a choice that they blame on what they call in-year overspends, money that was allocated by ministers under the previous Conservative government to which there was no money attached.
There are always financial pressures and difficult decisions for government to make. But Labour has chosen... Please, Tracy, I did let you speak. So Labour has chosen to those massive pay rises for train drivers, the generous pay rise to junior doctors, to do a new GB energy company, which is simply not going to achieve what it set out, but that's expensive as well. So they're choosing to spend billions of pounds on those things. And then what we've also heard from the Chancellor is that if people take up pension credit who are eligible for it, and I'm encouraging my constituents to do that, in fact, I have done for many years, encourage people to do that, there won't actually be any savings from this. So why embark on this cruel plan when there won't actually be savings?
Let me bring Josh in, because your party is against... your party is against means testing the winter fuel payment. But how would you suggest filling in what Labour say is a black hole of £22 billion, but the spending gap broadly?
I think let's see what we've just seen so far today, and it's Labour and the Tories just arguing with each other endlessly to no avail. There's no solution out of this. What I'm really proud, and I voted against scrapping the winter fuel payments, it's the wrong thing to do. It was a mid-year announcement just before winter, and it doesn't give people time to replan and rebudget. Pensioners across the country, and I've got 16,500 pensioners in my constituency in Maidenhead.
So you would support it if there was more time, if it was coming in next winter?
It's too late. It's too late. They haven't planned. I think the key thing we need to sit and understand is if there is, and if the government wanted to look at means testing, they're being really harsh on this, and it's a really crude way of doing it. What I want to see is actually the government coming round the table on issues like this, where they want cross-party support.
Hang on, because your manifesto said it would raise £27 billion from new taxes. I've got a list of some of them here. The Institute for Fiscal Studies does cast doubt as to whether your proposed measures would actually raise that much. But actually, they're not what they call victimless tax rises, are they?
Well, I think if you look at what we said in our manifesto, and our manifesto was fully costed out, we wanted to reverse the cuts to banks and the cuts for tax that banks have had. That's £4 billion a year.
Right.
Wanted to increase the social media levy for social media companies. That's an extra £2.5 billion. But if we look at what's happened, and we've seen it in local government finance, and we're now seeing it nationally, the Tories have ruined the budgets. My local authority in Windsor and Maidenhead, the Tories have ruined the local authority financing, they've ruined the national financing, and it's now other people who've got to pick up that mess and fix it.
Right. I mean, the legacy there that Josh has just set out means that arguments made by Conservative politicians like you fall on deaf ears.
Well, as I said, these are choices that Labour are making. What we're seeing already is this winter fuel allowance being cut for pensioners, this cruel cut. But the next thing that looks like it's coming down the tracks is cut to pensioners' bus passes.
Oh.
In the last 24 hours,
Well,
3 ministers have failed to confirm that pensioners will continue to receive their bus passes.
Well, hang on, Tracy. Let me just show you this headline. It's in the Daily Telegraph. Labour refuses to rule out scrapping bus passes for some pensioners. Can you rule it out?
Well, some pensioners, I mean, it's not very clear which pensioners, what thresholds and so on.
Well,
but
presumably,
listen,
it'll be better off pensioners will lose their bus passes.
I'm bringing buses back into public control so that I know what I can deliver for the people of West Yorkshire. And that is better, more reliable, affordable buses. I was one of the first mayors to bring in the mayor's fare, the £2 fare, in order to get people
Sure, but would you be
around.
upset? Would you be upset if bus passes are scrapped for some pensioners?
Well, we are making the case to government that you have to subsidise bus networks in order for more people to use them.
Yeah, and the answer to my question?
I can't imagine any world where there is a complete reversal for every pensioner in this country to now pay for buses.
Right.
Because we know that that is such a bonus for pensioners that they can get to clubs, it helps with isolation and loneliness, that they can get out and about.
Right.
And I am also looking at how we can get those with a disability, how they can, before 9:30, how they can use their passes as well.
Right.
We need to get more
All right.
people
Well, you've done
more
your pitch. You've
generally
done your
onto
pitch for buses, but Helen, presumably you'd be against that too if bus passes, free bus passes.
I'm really concerned, and
Right.
pensioners will be concerned at the possibility
Okay.
of losing their bus passes. Also, and there's something bigger on this, which is that the funding of buses and the viability of buses also depends on the government's support for the pensioners' bus pass.
Right. Do you
So
believe
the
in a
chance
smaller?
I
Do you
think she's
believe in
going
a
to
smaller
scrap
state,
that,
Helen?
If the chance of she's going to make savings by scrapping the pensioners' bus pass, actually then the question is, well, how will all the buses you're talking about, that I think are very important,
But
how will they be funded?
Broadly, do you support a smaller state, the state doing less?
I'm a Conservative, and I have said in public, and I see where you're going with this question. Of course, I've said in public.
Right, but you said
that there are
no
things that
to the first two things that a Labour government has introduced in order to try and save some public money. And as a Conservative that believes in a smaller state, you're saying no.
I'm a Conservative that believes on the one hand in a smaller state, but on the other hand, and you'll see what we did in the pandemic, and I did actually when I was a Treasury Minister, is making you support people who are the hardest up, who are struggling to pay the bills. Look at the support we put in for pensioners, the support with pensioners when those energy bills went up during the cost of living crisis. So we support those who really need support, but also...
Or you're
we're
appealing
driven
to your
achieve
mostly older voter base.
No, we're doing the right thing. We are committed to doing the right, but also the other thing is about the importance of productivity of the public sector.
Can't have
So you won't
productivity and
achieve
you can't
growth.
grow the economy without good transport.
Of course, but you won't achieve growth unless you make sure that you have a productive public sector as well as, of course, efficiencies achieved in the private sector.
You're supporting Kemi Badenoch in the Conservative leadership contest. Let's just have a listen to something that she said last week.
A government that tries to do everything will likely end up achieving nothing. It will also run out of everybody's money. Government should do fewer things, but better. And what it does, it should do with brilliance.
Well, if she's right, and I presume you do think she's right, government should do fewer things, as I was suggesting to you, perhaps like a universal winter fuel payment being one of them.
So I think I'm consistent on what I said a moment ago, which is that we support people who really need that help, who are really struggling to pay the bills. As I described a pensioner in my constituency who only eats one room in their house through the winter, so badly needs that winter fuel allowance and that support, while making sure that we try and have a more productive public sector. And we know that while the private sector has become more efficient in recent years, we haven't seen the same efficiency improvement in the public sector. That's one reason why, for instance, negotiations with the unions are really important.
Well,
so with the train drivers,
those strikes
not
are
to pay
over.
train drivers more without getting modernisation of working practices.
But you can't increase productivity in a region if people can't get to work because there is no resolution of a pay dispute. you cannot grow the economy unless you have a fantastic transport network across the country and across regions. We have been held back in the north, and this is your brief as Shadow Transport Minister. We've been held back in the north because of underinvestment. Decades of underinvestment.
So you must be concerned, Tracy. You must be concerned then.
Hang on. One lawful one. You must also be as concerned as I am in the decades of underinvestment in transport and the handbrake turns of a previous government in investment in rail.
What I'm concerned about is that your Chancellor has not committed to continuing the infrastructure investments in transport in the north and around the country that we had committed to.
Well, like
everything is under review.
You'll see in October.
That's what I would be worried about.
That's the process of Parliament.
Like cancelling part of HS2 in terms of commitment to investment. In terms of more investment, what would you like to see the government make as a priority?
We need to see investment in local communities and local services, and that's the key thing, and it's what Liberal Democrats have been arguing for ages now. You look at local bus routes in my constituency, and actually the Conservative government gave the local council a 2-year settlement for bus services. That means you can't plan ahead. A bus service takes longer than 2 years to bed in and become commercially viable. And in 2 years' time, the council might have to cut that route. And if they do, that's not what we want to do. That's not encouraging people onto buses. That's not encouraging that investment in local areas and the communities. So, Helen, you're talking about we want to invest in doing all this. The Conservative government didn't do any of that.
The £2 bus fare, for instance, which I know you referred to in your area, something a Conservative policy very much.
Just for the moment, we're going to move from buses and investment. Hang on, and we're going to go across to the United States presidential election because last night Donald Trump and Kamala Harris went head-to-head for the first time in what was a pretty personal and fiery debate between the two of them. Let's take a look.
Kamala Harris. Let's have a good debate.
Nice to see you. Have fun.
Thank you. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War.
We've had a terrible economy because inflation which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy. But if she ever got elected, she'd change it. And it will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist.
And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame.
You talk about extreme. This is, I think, one of the reasons why in this election I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans who have formerly worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney, and John McCain. His former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the Republic, would never survive another Trump term.
Well, that's a flavour of what was an hour-and-a-half debate between the two of them. We're joined by Sarah Elliott of Republicans Overseas UK and Kristin Wolfe of Democrats Abroad UK to analyse the debate and give us their thoughts. Sarah, starting with you, who won that debate?
Well, I think that Kamala Harris definitely had a good night. But Donald Trump didn't have a horrible night. He just may not have performed as well as he should have. This is a very close neck-and-neck election, so this debate really carried a lot of weight. We'll see if it does anything in the polls, but at the end of the day, Donald Trump was Donald Trump, and I think that we all know who he is, and that is baked in the cake. He made some good points, pinning Harris to the Biden administration agenda, but he wasn't as well articulated as he could have been in other areas. So it'll be very interesting to see if this actually moves the needle for either one of them. I thought that Kamala Harris was very good at baiting Trump, but did she have any real killer moments? Not so sure.
Okay.
We'll just have to see what the polls say.
Well, let's pick up on that. Kristen Wolf, were there any killer moments for Kamala Harris?
I think there were great moments for her throughout the entire debate. I mean, what Kamala Harris did is she showed that she acts and she speaks and she believes things that are presidential. She doesn't believe in these fictitious things that we heard Donald Trump talking about on the debate stage. And, you know, what she also managed to achieve in that time is she managed to show that she will be a president for all Americans. You know, she had three things she needed to do going into this debate. She needed to leverage the energy of this big tent campaign that has organically grown over time. And she needed to appeal to those independents who don't really yet fully know her, as well as those traditional Republicans whose conscience will not allow them to cast a vote for Donald Trump again, but still need some kind of reassurance to step over the aisle and come and put that X in the box for her. And I think last night she did that exceptionally well. She showed that she has policies that are rooted in... Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, Sarah, do you want to just respond to what Kristen has said about what Kamala Harris achieved?
Yes, well, I mean, to cross the box for independence, she had to lie about her agenda and what she has supported in the past. And she completely lied about fracking. She has called for it to end. She's lied about the fact that she did want to decriminalize illegal immigration. And she did want a gun buyback program, meaning she wanted to take people's Second Amendment rights away. So she is one of the most radical left-wing senators in the U.S. Senate. When she was there, she's also, she was completely let off the hook by the moderators, by the way. This was one of the worst moderated debates in American presidential history. And it was 3 versus 1. And anyone who has any sense of objectivity could see that Donald Trump was fact-checked, but not Kamala Harris.
Right. Well, Kamala, do you want to... Sorry, Kamala. Kristen, do you want to come back on Sarah about what she said about Kamala's record in terms of issues like immigration and fracking?
Sure, but first I'll just take that as a compliment, by the way, and be called Kamala Harris.
You do that. It's yours. It's
thank
yours.
you so much. But and I'm nowhere close to being as fantastic as she is. So if I, you know, just going back to that comment about the lies. I mean, the entire Republican playbook in this entire election has been nothing but, you know, insults, lies, and then some backward policies. And you know, when your guest was talking about, you know, that Kamala Harris was engaging in lies. I mean, there were so many lies that the moderators had to correct the record in real time. And, you know, but the biggest lie of all was that he once again in this debate denied the results of the 2020 election. And, you know, that is one of the fundamental problems with Donald Trump is he just cannot accept fact. He can't accept reality.
All right.
And I think she did a brilliant job on
it. All right. Well, what about that, Sarah? Answer that point.
Well, yeah, that's a very controversial point. A lot of Republicans would like him to move on and not look in the past. But what I'll say is, you know, our democracy, we're looking at a Democratic candidate that's never received one primary vote and is now the candidate for president. So if I, you know, as an American voter, I'm pretty disillusioned with this process, and the Democrats should be fired up that the party establishment forced this candidate on them where they were not allowed to vote for her. So don't think that the Democrats are some great model of democracy right now.
All right, Sarah, you have complained.
The whole covering up of Joe Biden's decline in age is disgraceful, and that's on the Democrats. And the Democrats' record, there is nothing to run on right now.
All right,
you
Sarah.
have Afghanistan, for instance, where 13 Marines lost their lives in that withdrawal. And that neither Biden nor Harris went to see those bodies returned to the United States.
All right, well, let Kristen respond. Let Kristen respond to that.
It's absolutely disgraceful what the Biden administration has done to our economy as well. And the economy is the #1 issue in this election.
Let Kristen respond to that.
First, let me just say that that was a pitch-perfect example of the Republican playbook in action: insults, lies, and these backward policies.
Answer the question.
Speaking the truth.
Yeah, answer the question.
It isn't the truth, Sarah. I'm so sorry, and I'm sorry that you don't understand how the Democratic Party's primary process worked. All I know is that Donald Trump never once appeared on a debate stage during the Republican presidential primary. He refused to do it despite being asked repeatedly to show up and to show the American people how he stacked up against Republican candidates. So let's kind of set that. No, I'm sorry, Sarah, I'm speaking. But I would like to respond to the Afghanistan point that you raised, because it's really important. And this is exactly why all of these military, former military generals and officials within our military ranks and leadership ranks have come out and endorsed Kamala Harris, because they have said that Donald Trump is a disgrace.
All right,
and Donald Trump put that Afghanistan withdrawal into motion. He invited the Taliban leaders out to our Camp David retreat. And, you know, he put that in motion and then bragged about it. That he could not, that the Biden-Harris administration could not stop the withdrawal once it was in motion.
All right, Kristen, let Sarah respond directly to that withdrawal from Afghanistan and Donald Trump's role.
He had a plan, but he wasn't the one that took the U.S. military out before actually evacuating our citizens and allies. He would have never done such a plan as that. In fact, Joe Biden didn't even listen to his own generals and his own director of defense. So it completely falls on him and falls on the Biden administration. And Vice President Harris was in the room. She is part of that agenda. And it is the biggest disgrace, especially we're talking about it on 9/11 today, by the way, which is so after 20 years of trying to rule out terror, that's how we end our legacy in the Middle East.
I'm going to say
and
thank
that
you.
is on the Democrats.
I'm going to say thank you.
That's what a lot of Americans, independents, minorities will be voting on.
I'm going to thank both of you, but just before I let you both go, would you like to see, Kristen, a second presidential debate?
I would welcome a second presidential debate, and I don't know if Donald Trump will appear again, because he did not perform well last night.
Let's ask Sarah.
Let's see.
Sarah, do you think Donald Trump should do another debate with Kamala Harris?
I don't think he needs to, but I think it would be great for the American people.
Right. And you'd like to see the moderators, in your view, behave more fairly?
Correct.
Just before I go on that, there was one question that the moderators did intervene over, and that is Donald Trump's claim that immigrants in Springfield, Ohio, are eating other people's pets. Is that true?
Well, there have been many people coming to city council meetings claiming so. People on the street have been talking about it. It needs to be investigated.
Right, but the city manager in Ohio.
Excuse me, I'm answering the question.
Yeah, but well, hang on.
At the same time, it is highlighting what the illegal immigration crisis, the mass immigration crisis that Vice President Harris has oversaw is happening to America.
Sarah,
and these small towns and villages.
I need to interrupt you, Sarah, because the city manager
like
in Springfield, Ohio, said it wasn't true, and that's why the moderators intervened. It's not true, according to the person who should know.
There were other areas. There were several
Sarah
other
Elliott,
areas.
Kristen Wolf, thank you very much for joining us. Let's just pick up with our panel here. Tracy, first of all, how decisive do you think that debate will be in terms of the outcome?
Yeah, well, I was really stressed for her because there was so much pressure. And it was really important that she delivered. My goodness, I think she smashed it out of the park. I mean, she was prepared, she had policy, she got under his skin, she also was joyful, and so much of that conversation that we've just heard is looking in the rearview mirror. And this was a real pitch for the future. And I think she really did perform well, and you could tell she's really prepped.
Right. I mean, they're neck and neck, though, and it's going to be extremely tight, partly because so many voters are entrenched in their views and support of either candidate.
Yeah, well, I think that it's important that there is now a real debate happening between the two candidates. But I recognise that the government will clearly need to work with whoever wins the election, whoever is the American president. I don't have a vote in this, we don't have a vote in this, but we want to make sure that they clearly have a fair election, and then we'll work with whoever wins.
Right, well, on that, I mean, if Donald Trump does win, what do you think, what are the implications for the war in Ukraine? Kamala Harris was pretty scathing, as we heard again by from Kristin Wolfe, about his views and his record in terms of relations with the military.
Well, I think it's really important that the US should continue to align with us and support Ukraine in the fight against Putin and his illegal invasion of Ukraine. That's what I would like to see, whoever wins.
Right. I mean, we can show you some pictures of Antony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, with the UK Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, boarding a train leaving Poland and going to Kyiv, where they're going to see Volodymyr Zelensky. Obviously, a very important meeting, and they are going to be discussing demands from the Ukrainian president about using UK and US long-range missiles to fire deep into Russia, which they haven't done so far because of threats of dire consequences, Vladimir Putin said. What do you make of that? Should David Lammy say yes to those demands?
Well, obviously, we're not in those debates, but the commitment from the UK to support the Ukrainians in this illegal war could not be more urgent, because we know how this could spin to tragedy across the whole of Europe. And for Donald Trump to say there wouldn't be a war in Ukraine if I was president, I mean, it's just the arrogance is off the scale. We know that Putin wants to destroy Ukraine, and we have to stand firm with Ukrainians.
I mean, Donald Trump refused in that debate to back a victory for Zelensky and Ukraine. What do you think will be the consequences of the war in Ukraine if it is a Donald Trump presidency?
Very scary. I think that, you know, we could actually start to see perhaps even the crumbling of NATO, the crumbling of the West, a much more isolationist world. And I think it's actually really important and a good thing that Labour and the Tories, for all their differences, are very united on the issue of Ukraine, both in the Foreign Secretary's team, Shadow Foreign Secretary's team. They need to work together on this issue to continue pushing the US and particularly the Republican side to stay staunch in their support for Ukraine. If there's a Democratic win, if Kamala Harris comes in, that shouldn't be a problem. But they really need to, you know, pull every single diplomatic lever to make sure if Trump does win, and there is a chance of that, and Keir Starmer will have to be cordial, David Lammy will have to be cordial as well, they need to ensure that they stay firm, because way too much is at stake. I think really the sort of global democratic order is even at stake.
I mean, how should a Labour government, Josh, handle relations if it is a Donald Trump presidency when it comes to this issue?
Well, the UK has got to work with whoever gets elected as president, no matter what happens. But I think I speak for quite a lot of people when I say that I share no values with Donald Trump. I think we can't be complacent about what a Donald Trump victory would mean for our allies and especially for Ukraine. But I think in a debate where Donald Trump should have been on the front foot last night, he's done 7 of these presidential debates when Kamala Harris hasn't done any of them, he really wasn't. And for a country that's so caught up in change and wants to talk about change and who is the change candidate, the choice is the candidate who's been the vice president for the last 4 years, or who was the president for 4 years before that.
All right, well, let's return to leadership here, because we've got Prime Minister's questions in just over 5 minutes' time. You can see in your screens there the chamber already pretty full ahead of the clash between Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak. And let's hope in the second such clash in the House of Commons since MPs returned to Westminster that Keir Starmer can remember that he is the Prime Minister and Rishi Sunak is the leader of the opposition. Let's take a look at this.
It's a legal decision, not a policy decision. And the Prime Minister knows the framework. This is a serious issue. It requires serious consideration. And the Prime Minister knows the legal framework. It's the same test for all licences, as the Prime Minister knows. And having applied the law to the facts and come to a legal conclusion, I don't think the Prime Minister is really inviting me to put that to one side.
I mean, old habits die hard, eh?
Yes, Owen was it was a mistake.
It's unfortunate.
5 times. I didn't notice it actually all 5 times. I did notice once or twice.
Years of doing it.
Well,
do you think so, or he doesn't quite believe he is the Prime Minister?
No, I think he's doing a phenomenal job as Prime Minister, actually, but it's just habits, isn't it?
I would say of the mistakes he's made, there are bigger mistakes, like the winter fuel allowance and cutting that.
Oh, well done. We won't return to that just a moment. There might be more of it in the Commons. What did you make of it last week?
I think it's actually quite endearing. I think, he's been relatively humble about the transition of power. A lot of the sort of speeches about moving into Downing Street from Keir Starmer have been about how, we need to be grateful that we even live in a society where we can have that smooth transition. Funny speaking about that after hearing about the US as well. And do you know what? It's a funny gaffe, and PMQs are rife for gaffes, and it's more of a sweet one. It's a less sort of a bitchy one.
What did you make of it, Joshua?
I didn't notice it in the chamber.
At all?
I didn't notice it.
That's because it's so noisy, I suppose, or you're so used to it.
I think Tracy maybe needs to write it on a big bit of paper on the top of his notes, or write it on his hand or something, just to remember.
He'll get used to it, don't you worry, Joshua.
Let's just show you this headline, BBC News. No leader's speech planned for Tory conference. Yes, on the other side of the ledger, perhaps Rishi Sunak is fed up with being leader of the opposition. What do you make of his decision not to make a speech as leader of the Conservative Party at the Conservative Party conference?
Well, I saw him do a great job last week at PMQs. I'm sure he'll do a great job at PMQs again today as leader of the opposition. But the fact is, our conference is going to be about our leadership contest and who is going to be the next leader of the Conservative Party. And that is really, really important. So I think it's the right thing to do. It's about who is going to be the future of the Conservative Party, but also, even more importantly than that, it's about the future of the country.
Right.
What is quite funny, though, is nobody wants Liz Truss's endorsement, which is quite right, because they don't want to be associated with that economic disaster.
All right, we'll leave that just there. Yes, of course, she's no longer an MP either. Let's have a look, actually, at the candidates. They were whittled down from 5 to 4 yesterday in the second round of this contest, which won't actually finish until the 2nd of November. Oh, we seem to have squeezed out a couple of them on either side there, but you can see... Mel Stride is actually out. Robert Jenrick, though, was still the favourite of Conservative MPs, but Kemi Badenoch has put on the most votes. Does Kemi have momentum if Robert Jenrick is topping the poll twice?
Yeah, Kemi definitely has momentum. As you said earlier in the programme, I'm backing Kemi, and I've heard her talk about her vision for the future of the country. Everyone knows she's straight talking. She says it as it is. People really want that from politicians, them to tell it as it is, but also to be optimistic and look to the future, and that's something I think she's brilliant at doing.
Are you surprised that Robert Jenrick has topped the poll twice?
No, I'm not. I think he is really has made a strong pitch as the candidate on the right, and I think his closest competitor in that regard is Kemi. I think I was actually surprised at how close Cleverly and Tugendhat came as well, getting the same score as well, and widening that gap. But I think Jenrick has really outdone himself a bit in this competition. The comms have been quite slick. He's been very clear about what his vision is, and it will be up to sort of Tory members to decide whether that's something they align with. And I think Kemi's campaign has improved a lot as well, and we've seen that in the results yesterday. But I think what will be interesting is how, all this competition is well and good. It's a pitch to Tory members. What will be the real challenge for whoever triumphs is how they are going to translate that to the public. Because it's all well and good to talk to your base, but they were really, really heavily punished by a whole load of demographics in the UK for the legacy of the last 14 years, how they reinvent themselves and how they ask the public to trust them again is going to be the real challenge rather than this competition.
And I think that's the point, though, isn't it? I mean, you look at... I'm still hearing the Tory candidates talking about things that were rejected by the public only a few months ago. You look at the Liberal Democrats, and we've got 64 new MPs, most in Tory strongholds. We have the seats of 3 former Prime Ministers and 4 Cabinet Ministers. And actually, what I'm not hearing these Tory leadership contenders are talking about is the things that are important to people: cost of living, NHS, sewage in the water. That's what people are talking to me on the doorstep about. Well, all I hear the Tory contenders talking about at the moment is the ECHR in Rwanda, and that was roundly got rid of.
I disagree with you. I mean, OK, you haven't had the opportunity to be in the hustings, of course, as I have, but actually that's why I said a moment ago, well, it is, of course, a Conservative Party conference and talking to Conservative MPs and members, particularly there, but actually, I said it's about more than that. It's about the future of the country, and that's why the candidates are talking about their vision of the country. So I'm particularly backing Kemi because I think she's got the right vision for the country as well.
Right, but of course they've got to win MPs over to get down to the final two that go before Conservative Party members. When it comes to what Joshua's been talking about, is it more important to deal with the sorts of issues where Liberal Democrats were victorious in the last election, or Labour or Reform?
I wouldn't say it's an either-or. We know we have to kind of fight on all fronts and win back votes on all fronts, whether it's people who went to Reform, whether it's people who went to Labour, whether it's people who voted Lib Dem, or people who previously voted for us and stayed at home. All of those people matter. We've got to have the right offer to the country at the next election.
I can hear your emphasis on the word country. No, it's definitely coming across. Who does Labour fear most? Who should Labour fear most?
Well, I'm not sure who they fear most because we have our mandate for the next few years, and certainly the public voted for change, and these candidates are not change candidates, in my opinion. They were part of the legacy that is impacting on every single community across this country. And, you know, they were steeped in those conversations, in those decisions, in the tanking the economy, all of that. They were part of that scenario. So I do think I'm looking forward to quite a chunk of time with the Labour government where we can reset the economy and reset the country. And then, of course, they'll be able to rebuild, and there will be probably new candidates.
You want more of what we've seen yesterday?
All right, on that note, let's go into the chamber for Prime Minister's questions.
Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This weekend we remembered the late Queen and her enduring legacy of service and devotion to our country. And I was proud to announce a new national monument located at St James's Park to honour her memory. And I know the whole House will join me in sending our best wishes to the Princess of Wales as she completes her treatment. Mr. Speaker, this afternoon we'll introduce the Renters' Rights Bill. After years of inaction, this government will oversee the biggest levelling up of renters' rights in a generation, and I urge the whole House to get behind it. And later this week I'll visit Washington to meet President Biden for a strategic discussion on foreign policy. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in the House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Torsten Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Back in the 1990s, the Conservatives claimed that the minimum wage would cost 1 million jobs. Instead, low earners have seen the fastest pay rises year after year, with no effect on employment. Year after year, which they oppose. Today, and under their watch, 1 million workers are on 0 hours contracts, and over a million people have no sick pay whatsoever, facing risks that nobody in this House would bear. The details matter, but it is outdated nonsense.
Order. Please sit. One, it's easier if you face me, I can hear it better. But the second part is it's meant to be a question, not a statement. No, I decide. Prime Minister, don't I?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Economic growth is our #1 mission, and that's why we forged a new positive relationship with business. But too many people are insecure at work, and that holds them back and holds our economy back. This government was elected to deliver for working people, and that is exactly what we will do.
We come to the Leader of the Opposition, Rishi Sunak.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I join with the Prime Minister in his words about Her late Majesty, the Queen, but also in his words about the Princess of Wales? She's been in the thoughts of everyone across the country, and I know everyone in the House will be delighted and relieved at the progress that she has made. May I also, Mr. Speaker, take this opportunity to pay tribute to Nicholas Howard. This is his last Prime Minister's questions after supporting 8 consecutive Prime Ministers through these sessions. Never my favourite part of the week, but his commendable service made it far more manageable. Mr. Speaker, yesterday, Labour MPs voted to remove the winter fuel payment. from over 10 million British pensioners, including those with just £13,000 of income. With that decision debated and made, it is now important that the House understands the full consequences of the government's choice. So can I very specifically ask the Prime Minister, will he now publish the impact assessment before the House rises?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the fact of the matter is this. They left a £22 billion black hole. Hid it from the OBR. Richard Hughes is absolutely clear. It's the largest year-ahead overspend outside of the pandemic. Now, of course, when it comes to mitigations and impacts, we've put those in place. Ramping up pension credit, dealing with housing benefit and linking it, something the party opposite didn't do for years. And because of the tough decisions that we're making to stabilise the economy, we can make sure that the triple lock shows that increases in pensions will outstrip any loss of payments. But before he complains about us clearing up his mess, perhaps he'd like to apologise for the £22 billion black hole.
Mr. Speaker, this has got... Mr. Speaker.
I want to hear the question.
Mr. Speaker, when I was in government, I delivered record increases in the state pension. We protected the winter fuel payment and we gave pensioners cost of living benefits. He's the one that's taking money away from pensioners on £13,000, Mr. Speaker. But this has got nothing to do with the public finances. His own Chancellor just this morning, his MPs may not have been listening to her, his own Chancellor this morning admitted that she would prefer it if this policy didn't even raise any money, Mr. Speaker. Obviously, the government would not have made this decision without an impact analysis. And yesterday, the Energy Minister confirmed that. So I ask, very simply again, why won't he publish the assessment now?
Mr. Speaker, I remember the days when the Conservative Party was to be concerned about balancing the books. They've left a £22 billion black hole. Responsibility for this decision lies there. The only way to rebuild our country and invest in our public services and make sure everyone is better off is if we clear up their mess and deal with the £22 billion black hole. But, Mr. Speaker, last week we learned that the Shadow Housing Secretary was calling for means testing of winter fuel payments. Now it turns out that the Shadow Paymaster General agrees with her and even boasted about texting his own mother saying she didn't need the payment. Until he apologises for the mess they've created, he's no position to criticise the action that we're taking.
Mr. Speaker, they're shouting now, but those arguments didn't even convince 50 of his own MPs, who suddenly found that they had urgent business elsewhere yesterday, Mr. Speaker. But we know why he's hiding the impact assessment. The Labour Party's own previous analysis claimed that this policy could cause 3,850 deaths. So are the numbers in his impact assessment higher or lower than that?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we're taking this decision to stabilise the economy. That means we can commit to the triple lock. By committing to the triple lock, we can make sure that payments of state pension are higher, and therefore there's more money in the pocket of pensioners, notwithstanding the tough action that we need to take. But he goes around pretending that everything's fine. That's the argument he tried in the election. And that's why he's sitting there and we are sitting here.
Mr. Speaker, today pensioners watching will have seen that the Prime Minister has repeatedly refused to admit or to publish the consequences of his decision, and we will continue holding him account for that. But changing topics, Mr. Speaker, today is Back British Farming Day, where we recognise that British farmers produce food that is higher quality, has higher welfare standards and higher environmental standards than imported food. And at a time of increasing global volatility, they are also crucial for our food security and national security. Can he therefore confirm, whether he will be adopting the NFU's recent proposal to enshrine a national food security target in law?
Prime Minister.
Well, food security is really important. I'm glad he's raised that. We have talked to the NFU about this, and rural issues are really important, and that's what we fought the election on, where we've got a lot of rural constituencies sitting behind me now. We'll continue to talk to the NFU. We do take food security very, very seriously.
I'm not sure I did hear a specific answer, Mr. Speaker, but farmers also do great work to preserve the beauty of the British countryside, and something I'm sure that the Prime Minister will appreciate, given his newfound preference for landscapes over political portraiture. But when it comes to land use, there are currently protections in place to ensure that the most productive farmland is used for food production rather than alternatives like solar. So does he agree that it is not appropriate or right that developers with a vested interest grade the quality of that farmland themselves? And will he look at making that process independent?
Prime Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, rural communities were neglected under the last government. Confidence was at an all-time low. And thousands of food and farming businesses have been forced out of business. Now, of course, we will work with them. Of course, we'll get the balance right. But we're again picking up, clearing up the mess and rebuilding our country.
Mr. Speaker, as a glimpse, in Wales, the Labour government hammered farmers, hitting them with top-down eco-targets. And Labour's own assessment of those plans said that it would lead to thousands of job losses, less food security, and destroy rural incomes, while farmers described it as bleak and damaging. So can he reassure English farmers that he won't threaten their livelihoods, and can he rule out imposing those same top-down targets here?
Prime Minister. We will work with farmers across the whole of the United Kingdom, as we've made clear, to support them. But here we are. Absolutely clear. No contrition, no responsibility for the economic black hole, the broken NHS, the prison crisis, the ruinous legacy of 14 years of failure. We've started rebuilding the country. Renters reform, house building, GB Energy, National Wealth Fund, Border Security Command, I could go on. Whilst they try to rewrite history, we're getting on with building a better country for the future.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure the whole House will firstly join me in paying our respects to Lieutenant Rodri Lyshan, who tragically passed away last week. My thoughts are with the family, loved ones, HMS Queen Elizabeth crew during this very difficult time. Mr. Speaker, housing in Portsmouth is in dire straits. But local residents in Portsmouth North have valid concerns around population density, infrastructure and the environment. So I'm glad this government is working on delivering affordable housing in the city. Can the Prime Minister ensure that the infrastructure is properly considered and that communities are involved in the planning process for any new developments?
Can I start by saying I'm sure the whole House will want to join me in sending condolences to the family of Lieutenant Lyshan. I agree with her on the desperate need for affordable housing, and that's why we're going to deliver the biggest social and affording housing uplift in a generation. We will get Britain building again 1.5 million houses, because the dream of home ownership was snuffed out under the last government.
We now come to the leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Red Davey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I associate myself and my party with the comments made earlier by the Prime Minister about our amazing late Queen, and also join him in sending our best wishes to Her Royal Highness, Princess of Wales. I don't think anyone could have not been moved by her powerful video, and we hope that she'll make a full and speedy recovery. When it comes to fighting cancer, we know all too well that every day counts. But in the last year of the last government, there were over 100,000 patients waiting more than 2 months just to start their urgent cancer treatment, the worst on record. So will the Prime Minister help boost cancer survival rates by guaranteeing that every patient can start their cancer treatment within 62 days?
Well, I thank him for that question on a really important issue, and There's a report out by Lord Darcy tomorrow which will set out in stark terms the failure in terms of cancer treatment under the last government, which is a really serious issue. This timeline matters, which is why we're taking steps straight away to make sure that we can comply with that timeline, because lives depend on it. And that's why we've already taken a decision to put more scanners in to catch this early and use technology. It's a very serious issue, very serious failure by the last government.
So, Ed David. Thank you, Prime Minister, for that answer, and obviously look at the plans that the government is putting forward. Last night, Liberal Democrats voted against the withdrawing of winter fuel payments. We believe it's just wrong to balance the books by removing the support from pensioners. But we do understand that there are some difficult choices to be made to clear up the appalling financial mess left by the last Conservative government. One of the many reasons for that mess was the Conservatives prioritising tax cuts for the big banks, costing £4 billion a year.
They pay more tax.
So, will the Prime Minister instead reverse those cuts so that we can afford to support millions of struggling pensioners through this very hard winter?
Well, I'll resist the temptation to get ahead of the budget. But look, what is important is that we recognise that there is this £22 billion black hole that's been left by the previous government. Now, I know that their practice was ignore it, to kick it into long grass. We're taking the tough decisions because I'm absolutely convinced that's the only way we can start rebuilding our country, investing in our public services and making sure that everybody is better off.
Patrick Hurley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My Southport constituency has experienced a difficult summer. Firstly, I want to reiterate that our thoughts are with the families of Alice, Bibi and Elsie, who tragically lost their lives in the attack in July. I welcomed the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary to our town in the weeks that followed, and we worked together to find further ways to bring our community together. Can I therefore ask the Prime Minister to take this opportunity to recommit the government's support for our town for those grieving and affected by the tragic attack?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank him for that question, and we stand with those who tragically lost their loved ones in this heinous attack. I did go up to Southport the day after and went back actually 3 days after that on a private visit to meet some of the first responders who had been at the scene and simply to say thank you to them. I can't tell the House how angry I was when I got back to London and saw that those same officers who had responded were having things thrown at them by far-right thugs. Mr. Speaker, we will work tirelessly to support his constituents, and I thank him as well for his hard work in this difficult time, working with Sefton Borough Council and Liverpool City Region Combined Authority to deliver a support package. The communities endured this horrendous event should be supported, and I know will be, across the whole House.
Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday we witnessed some extraordinary celebratory scenes outside Britain's prisons where, in some cases, serious career criminals were released. And this to make way for, yes, rioters, but equally those who've said unpleasant things on Facebook and elsewhere on social media. Does the Prime Minister understand there is a growing feeling of anger in this country that we are living through two-tier policing and a two-tier justice system?
I'm angry to be put in a position of having to release people who should be in prison because the last government broke the prison system. And the Prime Minister was repeatedly warned. He had his own release scheme. He was repeatedly warned that he had to adopt the scheme that we put in place. The former Justice Minister said if we don't do it, we'll have to get down on our knees and pray. The police chiefs made it absolutely clear in a letter to him before the election that he needed to take action, saying that they wouldn't be able to discharge their duties and saying the risk was loss of an ability to detain suspects. That means, Mr. Speaker, an inability to arrest people committing offences. That's how bad it was, and they warned the Leader of the Opposition that further delays until after the general election will increase the risk significantly. What did he do? He delayed and increased the risks.
Thanks a lot, kids.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the government's swift action to bring railways back into public ownership. Great British Railways will deliver much-needed reform, ensuring the network serves both passengers and rail freight effectively. So can the Prime Minister explain how Labour's ambitious railway plan will also deliver improvements to rail infrastructure to ensure my constituents get the service they deserve at Luton Station?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank her for raising that important matter. One of the first bills that we introduced was to reform our railways after 14 years of chaos. Great British Railways will unite track and train under a single leadership, and that means closer collaboration across the industry and faster, more effective decisions on critical infrastructure. And I know how vital that will be in relation to both Luton and Leagrave stations in her constituency. We're carefully considering the best approach, but I can assure her we're committed to ensuring our railways will be open to everyone.
Tessa Mount.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today is Back British Farming Day. The previous government let our farmers down and, in their incompetence, underspent the farming budget by £100 million. Will the Prime Minister deny rumours that his government plans to take advantage of the Conservatives' failure by removing that £100 million permanently? Farmers across the country want to know that the Prime Minister will increase the agriculture budget, as the Lib Dem manifesto proposed, to speed up the rollout of the new environmental land management schemes to support profitable, sustainable and nature-friendly farming.
Well, I thank you for that question. It is a really important issue, and our rural communities were neglected by the previous government, and that's why confidence is at an all-time low. And what we will do is to protect farmers from being undercut in trade deals, make the supply chain work more fairly, and prevent shock rises in bills by switching to GB energy. We won't preempt the budget in relation to this, but we will put the support in place. Thank you.
Luke Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Many of my constituents, including those at Chapel Gate, have told me about the so-called management agents who charge them rip-off service fees and then fail to provide even the most basic of maintenance. Many of them spend hours each week battling with these agents just to ensure that they and their neighbours are not fleeced in their own homes. Will the Prime Minister recommit this government to act where the previous government failed to reform the leasehold system, which is archaic, outdated and feudal?
Prime Minister.
Well, can I first welcome the first ever Labour MP for Basingstoke? And yes, we will reiterate our commitment to act to bring the feudal leasehold system to an end and ensure leaseholders can benefit from more rights, power and protections over their homes.
Brendan O'Hara.
Mr. Speaker, international law is clear. Dropping £2,000 bombs on densely populated civilian areas is a crime. And it's beyond dispute that Israel has used F-35s to do exactly that. Yet the government has chosen to exempt F-35 components from the arms licence suspension, when all it had to do was say that Israel could not be the end user if UK manufactured parts were included. Last week, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister stood at that dispatch box and he said, we either comply with international law or we do not.
That's right.
Why has he chosen not to?
Prime Minister.
We are complying with international law. We've set out our reasoning, and I think all fair-minded members of the House would support the decision that we've taken. The most important thing now is that we get a ceasefire in place. That is one of the topics that I'll be discussing on Friday to ensure that the remaining hostages can come out, that aid that's desperately needed can go in, and we can start the process to a two-state solution, which is the only way to lasting peace.
Graham Downey.
Fife has a proud defence heritage, and in my constituency of Dunfermline and Dollar, that continues with the dockyard at Rosyth constructing Type 31 frigates for the Royal Navy, along with a local supply chain of local SMEs. So will the Prime Minister ensure the Strategic Defence Review team visits areas of strategic importance such as Fife so they can engage fully with the local supply chain and ensure the SDSR supports Britain's security as well as local economies?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank him for that question and for championing his constituency, including the work at Rosyth Dockyard. The Strategic Defence Review will ensure that defence is central both to security and to economic growth and prosperity. The review will consult widely, including across the devolved nations, and I know the reviewers recognise the strategic importance of constituencies like his, and I will ensure that he gets the chance to meet the relevant minister to discuss the particular issues in his constituency.
Dr. Neil Hudson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The previous Conservative government committed to a rebuild of Whipps Cross Hospital, the Princess Alexandra Hospital in Harlow, and the establishment of a new community.
You have to sit down a minute. Look, I'm determined to hear this question. I don't expect the front bench to be shouting me down, and it won't happen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The previous Conservative government...
Trying to join in again?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The previous Conservative government committed to a rebuild of Whipps Cross Hospital, the Princess Alexandra Hospital in Harlow, and the establishment of a new community diagnostic centre at St Margaret's Hospital in Epping. Will the new Labour government honour these commitments and progress these projects in full, which are so vital to improving the health services needed by my constituents of Epping Forest? And if it helps the Prime Minister at all with his answer, these services will also help some of the constituents of his Health Secretary just next door in Ilford North.
Prime Minister.
Well, look, he's right to champion the hospitals in his constituency, quite right to do so. The problem with what the last government promised was this. They promised 40 new hospitals. The problem was there weren't 40, they weren't new, and many of them weren't hospitals. So we need to review what we can do and put it on a sustainable, deliverable basis. But we will, and he's right to champion those in his constituency.
Or are being built.
Annalise Bidgley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week, I met my constituent, Cheryl Corbell, mother of Olivia Pratt Corbell, the 9-year-old tragically murdered in 2022. Cheryl is campaigning for Olivia's Law, which would compel convicted criminals to attend court and face the judge and receive their sentence. Will my right honourable friend commit to supporting Olivia's Law and meet Cheryl to discuss how we can move this forward without delay?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, in the King's Speech, we confirmed that we intend to introduce legislation this session so courts have the power to order the most serious offenders to attend their sentencing hearings. This is really important, and I know it's felt across the House, because to deprive victims and their families of seeing the sentencing exercise is to deprive them of justice. I will meet Cheryl. I have already met Cheryl and gave her the commitment last August that we would do this, and I repeat it again today, and I would just pay tribute to the campaign that she has led.
Stevenson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If the Prime Minister was a pensioner earning $11,350 this year and receiving no winter fuel payment, what would he prioritise this Christmas? Heating or eating?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we have to be clear why this decision is being made. A £22 billion black hole. And the previous government would walk past these tough decisions, pretend it wasn't there, put it in the long grass. We're not prepared to do that. Because we're taking tough decisions, we can commit to the triple lock, and that means that the state pension will increase by more than any loss of the winter payment allowance. But I would just say this. The biggest impact on pensioners in recent years was when they lost control of inflation, when they allowed energy prices to go through the roof, and we went through a cost of living crisis. We're stabilising the economy to make sure pensioners never, ever have to live through that again.
Mark Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Annabelle is 5 years old and lives in my constituency. She has high-risk neuroblastoma. Annabelle has endured 15 months of chemotherapy, high-dose chemotherapy, stem cell harvest, proton therapy, immunotherapy, hair loss, nasal feeding. Now she urgently needs the drug DFMO, not yet available in the UK. It must be administered within 90 days of the end of immunotherapy. 91 days is too late. Will the Prime Minister please meet with Annabelle's parents to discuss the life-saving care that she needs?
Prime Minister.
Well, can I pay tribute to Annabelle for her incredible bravery and understand how important it is that cancer patients are able to benefit from rapid access to effective new treatments. The manufacturers of this drug have applied for a UK licence through Project Orbis, which allows the rapid review and approval of new cancer treatments. And we'll ensure that process is completed as quickly as possible. And I will also ensure that the Health Minister does set up the meeting that he's asked for.
Dame Harriet Ball.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thought that socialism was about taxing those with the broadest shoulders in order to help the most vulnerable. But it appears that Starmer socialism involves scaring those with the broadest shoulders out of the country by taking away the winter fuel allowance of frail 90-year-olds living in drafty homes. Will the Prime Minister apologise to my shivering constituents for his personal choice? And will he reverse this chilling decision?
My choice is to stabilise the economy after 14 years of failure. And I'll tell you for why. Because when a government loses control of the economy, it's working people who pay the price, and I will not let that happen under a Labour government.
Paulette Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. More than half of people with pancreatic cancer die within 3 months of diagnosis, and 7 in 10 people never even receive treatment. Every 2 minutes in the UK, someone is diagnosed with cancer. But for those diagnosed with the least survivable cancer, time has too often already run out. I'm really proud of the Labour government's commitment to our NHS, but will the Prime Minister now commit to reviewing a long-term cancer strategy so we can improve diagnosis and treatment rates in this country?
Prime Minister.
I thank her for raising this important issue, and it's obviously the second time it's been raised in this session. I'll have a lot more to say tomorrow when I deal with Lord Darcy's report. I pay tribute to her tireless campaigning, particularly in relation to pancreatic cancer. Cancer patients have been failed by the last government, waiting far too long for diagnosis and treatment. We'll get the NHS catching cancer on time, diagnosing it earlier and treating it faster, so more patients survive this horrible set of diseases.
Louis Fletch.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. Following Labour's disgraceful political decision to scrap winter fuel payments with little notice to millions of pensioners, will the Prime Minister today rule out scrapping concessionary travel fares and council tax discounts, which also help millions of pensioners across the UK? Yes or no?
Prime Minister.
Well, as he knows very well, I'm not going to preempt the budget. It will all be set out in due course.
Speaker, can I pass on the heartfelt thanks on behalf of the Bolton Council of Mosques, who greatly appreciated the dedication and leadership that the Prime Minister showed during the recent riots over the summer. Does my right honourable friend agree with me on the importance of supporting interfaith and community groups who play a vital role in bringing people together?
Minister.
Well, I thank her for raising that. And we owe an incredible debt of gratitude to our police for their courage in dealing with the recent disorders. And we took action to ensure they had the resources and powers they needed to tackle violence and restore order to our streets. We also, Mr. Speaker, provided additional security for mosques, ensuring freedom of worship and protection from racist threats. And in the aftermath, we saw communities who really represent Britain coming forward, led by faith groups and community organisations. They showed that unity and demonstrated our values of tolerance and of respect.
Anne Davies.
Diolch Llefarydd. Denmark has been undergrounding its electricity cables since 2008, building infrastructure and maintaining responsible stewardship of the countryside. The Welsh Labour government's policy is for all new power lines to be placed underground where possible. The UK Labour government favours overhead pylons. Why is his government opposing Welsh colleagues in Wales?
We are absolutely committed to the transition to renewable energy. The reason for that is because it gives us energy independence, it lowers the bills, and of course the next generation of jobs are tied up with it. We have to do it in a cost-effective way, and we'll make those decisions in the cost-effective way.
Jessica Morton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The UK steel industry needs a serious government which works in partnership with both businesses and trade unions to secure a transition that's both right for the workforce and delivers economic growth in Wales. We know that deindustrialisation can be devastating to communities, so can the Prime Minister tell me how the government's safeguarding jobs and securing the future of steelmaking communities like ours for generations to come?
Prime Minister.
We're taking every step we can in relation to the steel industry because it's vital that we give it the support that it needs. We need steel in this country. We need steel made in this country. And our plans and our missions mean we're going to need more steel, not less. And it's the duty of the government to ensure jobs and communities and people aren't ignored in the transition and that jobs are protected. And Mr. Speaker, I can say the Business Secretary will provide an update to the House this afternoon.
Ollie Glover.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Oxfordshire has seen a huge amount of population growth in recent years without the infrastructure to match.
Why is that?
A new railway station on the Great Western Main Line between Didcot and Swindon, Grove and Wantage, would help to reduce traffic and improve access to both Oxford and London. Does the Prime Minister support investment in our railway, and would he meet with me to hear the case for a new railway station at Grove and Wantage?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank the honourable member for raising this important issue, obviously very important for his constituents. And we are committed to putting passengers at the heart of our railways. Great British Railways will work closely with regional government, mayors, operators and passenger groups to ensure rail investment meets the needs of communities. And I will ensure that he gets the meeting that he wants with the relevant minister to discuss the issues in his constituency.
That completes Prime Minister's questions.
That brings us to the end of Prime Minister's questions. It's the third session with Keir Starmer as Prime Minister, and he seemed to remember that he is the Prime Minister after calling Rishi Sunak Prime Minister last week several times. It's also the last, actually, before MPs go off to conferences and will return in October. Let me welcome our guest for this part of Politics Live. For the government, the Paymaster General, Nick Thomas-Symonds. For the Conservatives, Andrew Bowie, Shadow Energy Minister. I almost made the same mistake there. And Henry Zeffman, who is the BBC's chief political correspondent. Rishi Sunak focused many of his questions on that vote last night, over which MPs have been rowing for some time, and that is cutting winter fuel payments to millions of pensioners. Well, it's happened now. It is going to go ahead. What did you make of the scale of discontent on the government benches?
Well, I think it was pretty unsurprising that Rishi Sunak focused on it, because it was clear both in the run-up to yesterday's vote and then in the vote itself that there was considerable unease, to say the least, on the Labour benches, including among many of those who ended up voting with the government. Because I think, and this took some people in Downing Street and the Treasury, I think, a little bit by surprise, you had two factors combining. One is that hundreds of Labour MPs sitting behind Keir Starmer are new, and they haven't had to account for controversial decisions of any sort before, made by someone else. And a lot of them were stressed out, basically, over the summer to be receiving dozens of emails for the first time from constituents saying, you are taking my money away. And the second factor is that they were pensioners. And that is particularly important because they vote in large numbers, and also because it's especially emotive when you're taking away a fuel subsidy for pensioners. In terms of what actually happened in the vote, it's hard to work out, because we have this perennial problem on any Crunch Commons vote, which is that people who are not there in the House of Commons, Nick, for example, aren't necessarily abstaining and signalling their discontent that way. But we reckon somewhere between 20 and 30 of those Labour MPs who didn't turn up were doing so in order to signal that they could not support this policy.
Well, that's some dissent. Yes, you weren't there. Why was that?
Well, I was dealing with a ministerial commitment that obviously was put in the diary ahead of the scheduling of the vote. We have changes, significant changes that are going to be made to our border that are only a few weeks away in terms of the introduction of what's known as the entry-exit system. So this is about biometrics, around fingerprints, facial recognition. Down in Dover, I'm having to do a huge amount of work to grip that across government, prepare government for it.
A legitimate
so
reason, as you would put it, but obviously others didn't quite have that reason. Do you accept, Nick Thomas-Symonds, that there are going to be many pensioners who fall just above the level for this support in order to claim either the fuel payment or, in fact, pensioner credit, who now won't be able to afford to heat their homes this winter?
Well, there will be additional support, obviously, available. In England, there's the Household Support Fund. In Wales, it's called the Discretionary Assistance Fund. So there is additional funding
So you don't think there will be any pensioners who won't be able to afford to heat their homes?
Well, listen, there will be extra support available in that regard. There will also be now a push on the take-up of pension credit. But listen, Joe, let's be straightforward about this. This is an extraordinarily difficult decision. I'm not for a moment hiding from its difficulty.
And you've made it.
We wouldn't want to be in the situation we are as a new government with the inheritance that we have. It is a £22 billion in-year black hole, not some sort of figure that may or may not come in the future. It is what we are dealing with now. And not to deal with that would be the biggest betrayal of our pensioners, the biggest betrayal of the British people, because if we failed to do it, we would be taking risks with our economy. That's what happened back in 2022 with Liz Truss. A Labour government will not do that, and we will take these difficult decisions to make sure we fix the foundations now so we can build for the future.
But it is £1.3 or £1.4 billion saving from what you are calling a £22 billion black hole. Those two figures are very wide apart, aren't they? So, I mean, when there was only one, actually, Labour MP who voted against, John Trickett. Should he be suspended, by the way, from the party for doing so?
That's a matter for the chief.
But should he be? I mean,
Seven
was suspended for not voting with the government over the benefits policy for having more than 2 children.
Well, I gave the same answer then as I'm giving now, which is that it's a matter for the Chief Whip. But to your point, Joe, about the size of this black hole, the Prime Minister and the Chancellor have said there will be, in the budget on 30th of October, more difficult decisions to come. But we have to do that to have a stable economic foundation, because without that stable economic foundation, and we've seen what happens when we had the instability in the economy in late 2022, it's working people who pay the price.
Right, well, that is the problem. Is your legacy, isn't it? It is the legacy of Liz Truss as Prime Minister that gives the sort of claims that are being made by Nick Thomas-Symonds and others credibility. Look, now, we can argue about whether it would actually risk the whole economy or whatever, but that's what Labour is saying. Do you accept that the sort of response, the defiance, the outrage from Conservative MPs over making a saving here of £1.3, £1.4 billion from winter fuel payments, no one's listening?
Well, they are listening. Pensioners out there are very concerned about the situation this winter. The fact is that if you are on less than £13,000, you will be protected. That is true. But if you're anything more than £13,000, which is not a lot of money in any stretch of the imagination, you will be losing vital support to heat your homes this winter if you're a pensioner. That is a decision and a choice that this government has made. They are owning that choice and that decision, and that is fine. But they've chosen to implement this change, take away this benefit, to save, as they say, £1 billion. At the same time as they are spending over £9 billion on public sector.
What choices would you make?
Increase.
What choices would Conservatives make in this situation? But when it comes to, you've said there are strains on the public finances. What choices would you make?
Well, look, I mean, we can't say what choices we would make. We're not in the government. We are in the opposition, and we're standing up for those people out there who are concerned about losing the support that they rely on to get through very cold winters.
But you're supporting Kemi Badenoch, and I've already played this before PMQs, but it's worth reiterating. You're backing Kemi Badenoch, former business secretary under Rishi Sunak, and she has said more than once government should do less.
Yes,
well, here's an example of government doing less and you oppose it.
This is an example of government trying to balance the books on the backs of poor pensioners.
So what would you do?
So in terms of reducing the size of we had a plan to reduce the number of civil servants working in Whitehall back to pre-COVID levels. We had planned to grow the economy. We were going to be.
Well, they want to do that.
Yes, they say they want to do that, but what they don't acknowledge is the fact that, you know, as a result of COVID, as a result of Ukraine, there were huge strains on the public finances and the economy, which is why we weren't able to do what we want to do, such as lowering tax, etc. But these are the sorts of decisions that you have to take when you're a government, and you have to own them. And to the government's credit, I suppose, they are owning this decision, but there's a lot of anger out there in the country, and there's a lot of fear out there in the country as well. In my constituency, for example, it's not unheard of for temperatures to dip below 20 degrees in the winter.
I understand.
There are 17,000 pensioners, we estimate, because we don't know, because they won't tell us,
all right. Well,
17,000 pensioners who will certainly lose the support this winter, and that is something that's just unacceptable.
All right, we'll come back to what government should stop doing in just a moment. But let's get to this impact assessment, because that was the substance of Rishi Sunak's questions about whether an impact assessment has been done, and we understand it has been, in terms of what will happen to those pensioners who lose their winter fuel payments, and why it isn't being published by the government.
Yeah, so an impact assessment is when civil servants in Whitehall look at how a certain policy, if implemented, would affect different groups, be they by economic status or other sort of ways you might split them up demographically. And Rishi Sunak essentially targeted his questioning on whether Keir Starmer would publish an impact assessment on this. I don't think Keir Starmer actually gave a definitive answer, but I think from the fact he didn't say yes, you can assume that, as it stands at least, the plan is for the answer to be no. But all sorts of governments, I remember, do not publish impact assessments and are pressed on impact assessments, and it's that kind of topsy-turvy world we're all getting used to when Keir Starmer sometimes calls, and he did do it once, by the way.
I missed it.
Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister. You know, the shoe is suddenly on the other foot, and people who might previously have had an interest in impact assessments being kept secret want them to be published, and vice versa.
Should it be published?
What you will get is a series of measures in the budget. I mean, as I think from our previous exchange a moment or two ago, Jo, as you said, the black hole is £22 billion.
Well, I think I was quoting Labour saying it's £22 billion.
I would expect, of course, around the budget, when you have in the round the range of fiscal measures, you will have a range of analysis, as is ordinarily the case, published alongside the budget. But you're talking about the figure. I mean, the Office for Budget Responsibility is actually conducting a review about the openness and transparency of the last government because of hiding these kinds of problems, which is one of the reasons we're in the position we are.
Right. I mean, Andrew...
Why was this decision not taken past the Office for Budget Responsibility?
Well,
and why was this decision not kept to the budget? You know, there's questions asked of the Prime Minister today about decisions, spending decisions. Why was winter fuel allowance taken as a separate decision and not taken as a part of the wider budget process?
Well, because I think...
Is it because the OBR might have cast doubt on whether this plan will save the money that the Labour government says it will?
No, it was because the Chancellor was setting out in her statement the very, very difficult choices there are ahead of us, but indeed showing as well the difficult choices we've had to make. Not hiding away from these difficult choices, but making these difficult choices. And we're doing it because it is the right thing for the country to have our public finances on a stable footing. If we don't do it, we're putting the incomes not only of pensioners but people across the country at risk.
Should all impact assessments of these sorts of things, if you're taking away a benefit, should they always be published?
Yes, they should, actually, frankly.
So why didn't the Conservative government publish an impact assessment when it came to removing the £20 a week increase that had been in place for universal credit?
Well, because that was a temporary measure. It was brought in as an emergency during the COVID pandemic, and it was taken away when the pandemic came to...
It wouldn't have caused any hardship whatsoever?
I was not a DWP minister. I wasn't involved in the decision-making process at the time, but as a point of principle, yes, impact assessments on issues like this should always be published.
Right, well, there wasn't one done, I understand, at that point. Do you think there should have been one done? Do you think that should always be the case?
Yes, frankly, I do.
Right, OK, so it was a mistake?
I mean... Yes, it was a mistake not to publish it. If it hadn't been done, there should have been one done. There certainly should be one done now, and it should be published.
All right, let's briefly go into the Chamber, actually. We're not going to hear exactly what Jonathan Reynolds... In fact, he's just sitting down, the Business Secretary is staying, but he has been giving a statement on a support package that the government is going to put in place. This is because of the steelworks in Port Talbot and closures that have been announced earlier this year. It is Tata Steel. They closed close one blast furnace in Port Talbot in July and plans to close its second at the end of this month. Let's first of all hear from Gary Smith from the GMB Union.
We really have to stop this decarbonisation through deindustrialisation, serving up P45s to working class people, hollowing out working class communities is not the way to decarbonise this country. Our message to Ed Miliband is very clear. We are worried about a lot of promises that are not being delivered on jobs. We want to work with you on an industrial plan that's going to bring jobs, skilled jobs and hope and investment back to working class communities. And he needs to get on with it now. He's made big promises, time to deliver.
Nick Thomas-Symonds, what's your reaction to Gary Smith saying stop the pace of decarbonisation because of the job losses?
Well, I entirely agree with what Gary Smith said there about decarbonisation not meaning deindustrialisation. I also agree with what Gary Smith has said about working on a plan for the future that is about jobs in the energy transition.
Right, but even with the money that's been announced by Jonathan Reynolds, it's going to result in around 2,500 job losses.
Well, listen, I'm also at a disadvantage because I haven't heard precisely what the statement is. I'm sure you'd appreciate
But I think you're
that.
expecting pretty well the sort of broad parameters.
But in terms of what is happening with Port Talbot, there's obviously some of the discussions going on that have commercial sensitivity to them, but there are also discussions that are going on that we can speak about, which is firstly trying to secure as many jobs as possible for the future at Port Talbot. That is hugely important. But secondly, investment. The Welsh Secretary only in recent weeks has announced additional investment in terms of support for the workers at Port Talbot, workers in the supply chain, of which is significant, but also in addition to that to the local community. So I would certainly expect continuation of that support. But precisely what the Business Secretary will now say, obviously, I've not quite seen in the chamber yet.
Andrew, your reaction?
Well, I obviously, like Nick, haven't seen exactly what the Business Secretary has announced, but I think this speaks to growing concern across other parts of the country as well, that the threat of deindustrialisation in this headlong rush to net zero that's being set out by Ed Miliband as the Secretary of State for Energy. For example, in my part of the world, a part of the world reliant on the oil and gas industry as the main driver of the economy, there are concerns that the accelerated decline of the North Sea oil and gas basin will lead to the similar situation as we're seeing in Port Talbot right now. Yes, it's a transition. Yes, we need to decarbonise.
Otherwise, you're not going to hit those targets.
We need to do it in a way that is responsible, that ensures that there are jobs for these highly skilled individuals who are very worried that there will not be jobs moving forward. And we need to ensure that we do it in a way that protects our energy security, as well as making sure that we clean up the environment.
Nick?
Of course we need to do that on energy security. And I mean, it was a mistake by the last government, if I may say so, from 2015 to, in effect, stop any onshore wind developments. And I think our Clean Energy for 2030 mission, onshore wind, offshore wind, the technologies of the future, is hugely important for that energy security, so we're not left exposed to the whims of dictators like Putin and the impact that has on world markets. But secondly, to bring down bills, which is fundamental to our long-term.
Oh, when would those bills be cut?
Well, they will obviously be cut as part of that mission. I can't give you a precise date, Jo, on that, but our aim is 2030. It is clean energy by 2030. Ed Miliband has already got the creation of GB Energy going through the Commons. We've already announced our National Wealth Fund, so the work on that is underway. And to Andrew's point, it is hugely important, I agree, to prioritise jobs as part of that transition. That's exactly what we...
But there will be job losses.
It's transition. It's transition.
People losing their jobs.
So there, but there will be new. Well, we can see what's happening at Port Talbot. But come on, Andrew. I mean, that was the deal that the government of which you were a member agreed, which included £500 million of investment in return for substantial job losses. But prioritising jobs for the future and the new jobs that can be created is what's crucial.
Well, Henry, here is a clear example of the tension that does exist, will continue to exist between transitioning the economy, making it greener, a commitment by both the previous government and this current Labour one, and the price that could be paid by local people in areas like Port Talbot.
Yeah, and on the specifics of what Jonathan Reynolds has just announced, I've had a few of them through. I mean, this is the government contributing many millions of pounds to help Tata Steel build a new electric furnace, but still expecting 2,800 or so jobs to go. Jonathan Reynolds talking about how they've got assurances of improved redundancy terms for some of the workers there, but obviously still talking about redundancy. And yeah, it does speak to a broader question for the government about what kind of economy they want to build in the UK over the coming years and decades. I mean, Keir Starmer talks in those terms, decades, doesn't he? I mean, we heard from Gary Smith of the GMB there. I mean, in some respect, he's just representing his workers. B stands for Boilermakers in the GMB, so it's perhaps not a surprise that he's got concerns on this. But more generally, you know, we saw today the GDP figures, the growth figures for July, second consecutive month in which it's flat. And this government, while it is prosecuting the case against its predecessor and about what it's inherited, and I'm sure we'll hear that £22 billion figure for literally decades to come, it is still going to have to find a way to get the economy growing. And these questions of how fast the green transition should be are at the heart of that.
Right, let's talk.
It was growing up until July. We should make that clear.
Right, yes, and it's been the last 2 months that it has flatlined.
Let's over the past 14 years.
Well,
over the past 14 years.
Yeah, well, let's not have a quick argument about growth because we've only got a few minutes left, and I want to talk about the Renters' Rights Bill. I think we can show you a headline there. It is BBC News. Aim for no-fault eviction ban to be in place by the summer. Now, if you're a regular viewer of Politics Live, we've been talking about this for a very long time. It was something that the last Conservative government failed to get on to the statute book. What is the plan, Nick?
So you've set out the timetable, which was set out by the Housing Minister, which is to have this in place by next summer. You know, the Section 21 no-fault evictions, I mean, both parties actually have been pledged to end this since, I think, the Conservatives from 2018 had pledged to actually do this. It is one of those things that is a driving cause of homelessness. I think this is a much-needed, necessary, progressive reform that is going to enhance the rights and securities of people who are renting their homes. And I think will have a really good benefit for our society in reducing the amount of homelessness. I'm delighted to see that the Housing Minister, Matt Pennycook, is getting on with this. That's exactly what I'd expect him to do. And the sooner it's in place, the better.
Why not go further in this bill? As you say, people have waited a very long time. There seems to be consensus on it on both sides of the House. But why not go further and introduce rent freezes, which a lot of people in the Labour Party would support?
Because I don't think the answer to our housing issue is on rent freezes. I think the answer is in terms of supply. And I think in terms of supply, we have to do two things. Firstly, ramp up our house building, which is what the Prime Minister has pledged to do. But secondly, we need to make changes in our planning system that make those developments far easier to secure.
Why did you fail to get it on the statute book?
It's an incredibly complex issue, and we're taking time to get it right. A lot of the work that was done in preparation for Angela Rayner taking this bill through was actually being done.
Well, you had a huge majority. You were elected with a huge majority in 2019.
Look, there are things that we wanted to achieve that we didn't have time to deliver, but I'm very pleased that this is being taken forward. We need to see the detail of what's published, and we need to ensure we get it right. Where I do agree with Nick is that rent freezes are not the solution. We've seen what's happened in Scotland. There has been a reduction of supply as a result of that. Other cities, other countries around the world where rent freezes have been introduced have had an adverse impact on the delivery of private rented accommodation, and that is preventing people being able to have a roof over their heads.
But do you agree with critics who look at the record of the last Conservative government from 2019 that the legislation didn't succeed actually because too many of your own MPs are landlords and they opposed it? It was vested interests.
Absolutely not. No, we do need to ensure that landlords are treated fairly in this process, and that's why we're going to wait and see what the detail of this bill is before we take a position on it. We need to ensure it's right. We need to obviously protect renters. We need to protect the supply of housing, as they have not done in Scotland. That's the SNP, not Labour, by the way. And we need to ensure that this is fair also to those landlords who are providing a service for many millions of people across the country.
I mean, there are also landlords, of course, in the Labour Party. Let's have a look at this headline from a couple of weeks ago. BBC News, ants are everywhere. Labour MP's tenants reveal condition of flats. Now, this is reporting that Jas Athwell, new Labour MP for Ilford South, rents out flats with black mould and ant infestations. It was discovered by the BBC. Now, he's apologised and sacked the letting agent, Jas Athwell. He owns 15 rental flats. Should he still be a Labour MP?
Well, firstly, I'm not defending that condition of that accommodation is completely and utterly unacceptable. Jas Athwell has apologise. I understand, as you say, Jo, he has now changed the letting agent that he was using to assure himself of the conditions of those properties. Look, these matters of discipline, I gave you the same answer earlier on the vote last night. These are always matters for the Chief Whip, not for me. But
if
Jazz Athwell's done the right thing.
If it was up to you in terms of
changing his letting agent.
Right, and that's enough.
Well, look, he has to, in my understanding, this is what he has done, satisfy himself with the condition of the properties. But I'm not defending the condition those properties were in, whether it is a landlord who is a Labour MP, a Conservative MP, or indeed any member of the public. That is not acceptable, and that is why we are legislating, both in terms of banning the no-fault evictions, but also in terms of the condition of properties in the private rented sector as well.
All right, that's all we have time for. Thank you very much to all of my guests for joining me on this part of the programme and before Prime Minister's questions. That debate is ongoing in the House. That's the response from the Business Secretary in terms of the situation at Port Talbot Steelworks. Bye-bye.